it was supposed to be underground. Our crowds consisted, when we were sold out, I think if full capacity was 90. Dusty, he's a freaking genius, okay? I used to have to translate for people because they couldn't understand sometimes, because he was always out there. There was nobody watching us. There was no one looking over our shoulders. Nobody watched Bright House TV, right? So there's nobody from Connecticut, who's watching the one show on Bright House. So nobody ever saw anything that we did. After each of the TV tapings, we'd go to the bar of the Brick, and guys like Wade Barrett and Drew and Sheamus, we would all go out and just talk and commiserate. And the next thing you know, you're building relationships with people and you're learning different things about them.
Prime Time Backstories!
Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome to Prime Time with Sean Mooney Backstories with my longtime close personal friend, Chris Chambers. Chris, how you doing? I know Gene Okerlund would have welcomed you the same way.
Meanest Genus. I miss him every day. I do.
Me too. All right, listen to this, folks. Wade Barrett, Seth Rawlings, Bray Wyatt, Drew McIntyre, Roman Reigns, the Usos, Rusev, all of New Day, Tyrus, Dean Ambrose, Damian Sandow, Joe Hennig, Ryback, Heath Slater, and let's mention a few women's names here. Natty, Paige, Oxana, Eve Torres, Charlotte, Sasha, Bayley.
Don't forget the Bella twins, Summer Rae, Alicia Fox, Caitlin, Emma, and don't forget, going back to the boys for a second, don't forget Sheamus, who was our first big star, Enzo and Cash, Corey Graves, Cesaro. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. So, folks, listening to this, I know you're saying, well, of course, these are all big WWE stars. But how do you think they got there? And Chris Chambers knows all about that. Chris, tell me how this all came together with these tremendous talents.
Well, the one thing we all have in common with them is we all work together in a tiny, crappy little warehouse on Dale Mabry Avenue in Tampa, Florida, called Florida Championship Wrestling, or FCW. FCW. And it was it was very much an underground thing, both figuratively and literally. But it was, looking back on it now, it's hard to believe in this tiny little warehouse that had no air conditioning or anything, that all of this talent was there at one time. And I just, seeing so many of them become big stars over the years, and some have moved on and some have done other things. But to see so many of them be, on the grand stage and have incredible careers, there is no way of knowing in that little building that could have possibly happened.
Now, let's get to the backstory on all of this and the concept behind it. I kind of liken it to the AAA of the WWE, but how did this all come together? Was it Vince's vision? Like you said, it was kind of this underground thing. They wanted a place where they could develop talent.
It's a little bit convoluted, but there's, like, at the time before FCW, we had OVW, which was Ohio Valley Wrestling, and in that group we had Brock and John Cena and some other really big stars. But there's always machinations, behind the scenes, who owns what and this and that, and there's liability issues and blah 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 blah. So long story short, FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling, used to be, back in the old days, it was like a territory. Yeah. And, and back in the days, Gordon Soleil was the big time announcer. And once we started doing shows, we signed off every show with an old tribute, a clip of Gordon Soleil saying, "Good night from Florida Championship Wrestling." And he had long, been gone at that point, but just as a tribute to him, we did. So anyways,
wait, though, before we really move on, because you did mention Ohio Valley.
Yeah.
So what happened with that? And that that led to this.
So again, a lot of it was, legal stuff and logistics and the building and blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, liability issues. So, WWE was in charge of OVW. Well, when FCW came along, technically, it wasn't WWE. Steve Keirn, who was Skinner and Doink and a great human being, a great trainer, he had purchased the rights to Florida Championship Wrestling, FCW. And so when he got, he got the lease on that warehouse on Dale Mabry, he had an agreement with WWE that he would be the training facility, but it was separate. Technically, it was separate, even though all these guys were WWE connected, and even our posters in the back were old pay-per-views and things like that. But you won't see a WWE logo on FCW, the old FCW, anywhere. It's not on the TV shows. It's not on the posters. I got an old hat when we cracked 50 episodes. We were so proud. Dusty made 50 episode hats. But there's no WWE logo. So part of it was, believe it or not, it was supposed to be underground. Okay. Yeah. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. One of them
must have been really difficult to do, though, especially in this day and age. I mean, it wasn't this long ago. We're talking, what was it?
Well, what's funny? The internet was around, but smartphones were just, when I started at FCW in 2008, I don't think smartphones even came around to 2009, 10. So there wasn't a lot of people with, posting things.
Still had the dirt sheets, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But still, nobody knew who anybody was. So it wasn't like, whatever. Our crowds consisted, when we were sold out, I think if full capacity was 90.
Sold out.
So it wasn't a big deal. And so anyways, one of the things, I don't know what direction you want to go in, but I can give you all kind, talent direction, TV direction, all of that, because one of the gists of it was for everybody to learn from the ground up. And
I do want to get into how you got involved, because that's a pretty interesting story too. And then those early days of that, because like you said, it was basically this warehouse, not air conditioned, and believe that in Florida was that's a big detriment. So let's kind of back it up there. Because you were out, so kind of give us a quick backstory on that, and then how you got pulled back in.
Well, I was fired back in 2007, and that's a whole episode for another time. So I don't know that we really want to get into that right now. But anyways, I had moved to Florida and blah, 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 blah. And, Kevin Dunn had reached out to me in February of 2008. Hey, man, you busy doing something? I'm like, yeah, whatever. But nothing came. He didn't tell me anything. He just said I might have something for you. Never heard from him again. All right. So summer of 2008, I'm out in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, with this guy you might know named Sean Mooney, who had you had a radio show out there, right? And
sports.
Yeah, Mr. Sports. He had a sports radio show, and I helped produce it, and it was so much fun. I remember one of the things I remember that was most fun was we had Rob Gronkowski on when he was a tight end for U of A. He was just as crazy then as he is now, and he was.
I got to know him pretty well.
So anyways, while we're out there doing the show, I get a call from Kevin, and he's going, hey, Chambers, what are you up to? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm in Arizona producing a radio show with Sean. He goes, well, we're starting this thing not too far from your place in Florida, because I had moved to Wesley Chapel, Florida, which is a little north of Tampa. And it's this thing called Florida Championship Wrestling. It's a training facility, we got all this talent coming in. Do you know anything about it? I'm like, no. So I have no idea what you're talking about. And he goes, yeah, we're trying to train new wrestlers, and we've been thinking about maybe televising, the product, so the talent has an opportunity to learn how to work on camera. Yeah. Would you be interested? in working with them and helping out. And at this time I was like, I don't know. And if you recall, I flew from Tucson, back to Tampa, and we did like a pilot episode. And it was fun. It was really kind of fun. Kevin actually did the first pilot himself. And they offered me a gig, and I met some of the folks there, and I had known some of the people. Some of the trainers were, Dr. Tom Pritchard, who I always really liked, and Billy Kidman was there, and William Regal, and they made you feel welcome. And I kind of knew I had met Dusty before, Dusty Rhodes, but I didn't really know him at that time. We later became best friends. But that was a process too. But anyways, I decided, wow, this could be fun, because I had never worked with people, from scratch. Like,
Developing.
I helped develop.
Had these guys who were polished by the time.
Well, they were polished, but they just needed help. Like Stone
Right.
Cold or Rock, or whatever, Mick Foley characters and things like that. But they were already, established people. They just, needed a little tweak or whatever. This was starting from scratch, and it was intriguing on every level. And of course, it was challenging. And from a TV standpoint, it was an interesting concept. We only had 3 cameras, but what was interesting was we were only on one station. It was Bright House Cable Network. It was one little station in Tampa called Bright House, and that was intentional. Okay, so the intent was Vince, who didn't own it, but did, didn't want. He wanted the flexibility of taking a character and changing it, and nobody not really knowing that this person, I changed him from X, to Y. So that was his philosophy at the time. And why be on TV at all then? Well, that's a great question.
Sure.
Because a lot of times when guys and girls would get called up, they didn't understand how to work their matches to the camera instead of the crowd. And especially back in the old days, when the arenas weren't sold out, the hard camera was where all empty seats were. So you still had to work to the camera, even though the crowd was behind you. Your instinct when you're working to a crowd is to work to the people. So a lot of times, young talent, they'd win a match and they turn their back away from the camera, which is the bigger crowd.
Hard camera,
yeah. The hard camera. So we started teaching the talent things like that, like, always remember, even though in that FCW, even though it was tiny with 90 people, there still was a hard camera side with basically nobody there.
So why even put it out, though? I mean, like you said, you could have created that, just had cameras and taped everything and then been able to review it. Why actually put it out so that people could see it in this little, in a small market area?
Because even then it's different when it's edited and it's a show and there's commercial breaks and you see what's working and what's not working. And of course, like I said, and also from a training standpoint is teaching the performers, we called it a triangle. You have the hard camera right in the middle and you had the handhelds in the corners. And so when you want these reaction shots, you would work into the triangle. So, the faces. So part of it was also for all of us to see what was really working and you got a little bit of reaction from the audience, but it helped a little bit defray the costs, from Bright House. We didn't make a lot, but it was like a tiny little bit because when I say we didn't have a budget, we didn't have a budget. Like when if I was shooting Summer Rae in the general manager's office, I brought my furniture from my house. I put it in my SUV. And Jeff Lane, who was our guy down there, he would get everything set up, lights, whatever. But it was all my furniture, my wife's furniture from her house and other things like that. I mean, we had no freaking money. Yeah. So anyways, the gist of it is to get these guys and girls an opportunity to work on TV. So lights, camera, where the hard cameras were, and that's really what it was. And again, Vince wanted the luxury of changing characters or whatever if it came about.
Experiment, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, the way that this was put together, eventually it would become NXT.
Yeah.
But those massive crowds of 90 people. How did this even? Was it all word of mouth?
Yeah.
You didn't advertise. It was
no,
because after a while, people had to have found out like this is a WWE connection here.
It was word of mouth, and again, like even then, we didn't have like when we became NXT, and we'll get into that later. We were worried that we wouldn't be able to fill up an arena, so we'd bring somebody from the main roster for a dark match or whatever. Yeah. Down there, it was like it didn't matter. Okay, it was 2 rows of people, and they were pretty much the same people every week. It really was. And occasionally we'd have somebody come in for either like a little training set. Like I remember Sam Punk came for a little while. He was rehabbing. Or I remember, this was funny, Daniel Bryan came once. This is before he had the beard, before he had been called up. And and again, like I don't know, independent wrestlers and things like that. And I get to meet a lot of these guys later, but and again, remember, we're in a little tiny warehouse, and there's only going to be 90 people. So there's a card table set up front, where the ticket guys are coming in, and there's this guy signing autographs. I don't know who he is, so I say to Dusty, I'm like, "Who's that little boy signing autographs?" Out by the table, and he goes. Little boy, he goes, that's Daniel Bryan. He's a wrestler. And I'm like, no way. And he's like, yeah, because he looks so small, and I was so embarrassed, and then of course, the one thing that's really cool about working at, at a place like FCW is you get to see these guys, live and raw and whatever. And, a lot of people, they don't have the footwork, and you can pick that out right away. Daniel Bryan got in the ring, and I was like, holy mackerel. I mean, it was like instantly, like, you're like, oh, I get it. He's small, but holy moly, this guy's good. I mean, it was like, wow. I didn't know he had already been working for years. And this was really just a rest stop for him till they figured out, how they wanted to bring him in and stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, it was,
It really was like the AAA then. I mean, it was. Down, they could work on something that's like getting down, set down to the AAA ranks, A ranks in baseball.
It was. Here's one of the first stories. This is an interesting. I've never told this story to any. Like, I'm going to tell you Sheamus' story. He doesn't even know the story, and we're pretty good friends. I've never told him this story. Okay, so Sheamus. He was one of the first, talent that they were like, hey, there's something we can do with this guy. This is before Roman and all those. But Sheamus and Drew and Wade Barrett were all, they all kind of worked together and all that. And they were all kind of standouts. But the rumor was that Sheamus was going to get called up. So you want to put a package together. You should put a video package, this kind of thing, whatever. And somebody gave me the Iggy. You know what the Iggy is, right? Your audience knows. It's like the clue in on what's going to happen. So somebody told me that they wanted to bring him up and be Hornswoggle's little brother.
Oh, God.
And at the time, Hornswoggle was a leprechaun, okay? Right. And he was, a small person who was a leprechaun. And at the time, when Sheamus was working at FCW, I mean, to me, I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, holy mackerel, this is like a Irish version of Stone Cold. The guy he's strong, he can move, he's good on the mic, he's got a freaking attitude, he's smart.
Accent.
He's really smart, by the way, super smart. So it's a guy that can grow and all that. And I'm like, oh my God, if they call him up, he'll never get rid of that. No matter who he always will be Hornswoggle's, and our fans, they'll throw it in his face, the whole thing. So I didn't know it. I was like, oh my God, I don't want this poor guy to get that gimmick could like ruin his career. Is there something? What could I do? There's got to be something. And I've never really done this before, especially this is the first time I did it at FCW. I called up Jim Johnston, who was the music composer, and Jim and I had worked on a lot of themes, over the years from, Stone Cold, DX, Gold, a whole bunch of them, Jericho. So I called Jim up and I said, Jim, I need a favor from you. And I'm sorry to do this because, at that time, no one at FCW, I forgot to say this because we have no budget, no one had entrance music. The music that we used was always stock music. Go to the library, Monsters of Rock or whatever. This is, pick something out. That's their music. So, because we were on TV on Bright House, so we couldn't afford to clear anything because we didn't have any money. So everything was stock music. So I begged Jim, I said, I know you're busy. Is there any way you could write a piece of music for Sheamus? And he goes, well, what's he like? And I said, he's an ass kicker. If you could do something, he's Irish. Maybe you can do like a little bit of a hard rock rap kind of thing like we did with some of the other stuff, but make it, whatever. So he did. And he sent me the music and I loved it. Okay. Yeah. And it's the entrance music that Sheamus ended up using on WWE. So Sheamus has no idea, by the way, that any of this is going on. Okay. So I call him into, Dusty and I call him into our master control, it's the size of a friggin' closet. It's smaller than my office. It was just tiny. And that was the only room in the place, though, that you could close off and have some privacy. And I said to Sheamus, I said, I kind of just knew him a little bit then. I didn't really know him well, but I said, you might be getting called up and I hear good things about you. And I kind of went out on my own and I called this guy and we made some music that we thought might be really good for your entrance. And he's like, okay, whatever. So,
okay, fella.
Yeah, Kofi. Exactly. And so we played it for him and he was like, I could tell you, whatever. And he's like, can you play it again? We played it again. He goes, yeah. He goes, that's cool. I really like it. So,
yeah.
So it became his entrance music. So then I gave it to this, one of the guys who was putting things together back then, this fellow Matt Martellero. He ended up working with Hunter later down the road at NXT, but he was there at FCW and he was the guy who would send all the tapes and do all that stuff of the up and coming talent. So I asked Matt to make sure you use this music and say that it's that this guy's an ass kicker and this is what he does because we kind of knew we didn't want him to be Hornswoggle's little brother. No disrespect to Hornswoggle, by the way, but it's just like it's just like wow, that's your first thing in WWE is like so. The package gets sent to Vince, and Vince, he had been aware that somebody on the writing team had pitched this idea for Sheamus to be Hornswoggle's little brother. And that was the whole point of even showing him the package. So, because Vince was, Hornswoggle's, all right, let me see this guy. So they showed him the package, which now had that new music on it instead of, the original stock music. And Vince goes, he was like, hell no, can't be Hornswoggle's little, but this guy's a freaking ass kicker. No friggin' way. This guy's great. So Sheamus could have got called up earlier. He would have been Hornswoggle's little brother. He stayed. He didn't get called up because they refigured out what they wanted to do with him. I never told Sheamus this story.
Wow. He get a chance to do that.
He never knew that he was this close to being Hornswoggle's little brother. And again, no disrespect to Hornswoggle, great character, great employee, everybody loves him. But I didn't think that would have been good for his career. But that was like the beginning. When he was really the first guy where it's like, hey, there is things I can do to help. Because, everything, and Sean, how it is when you work with a lot of the guys there, at first it's old school. Back when I started in production, it was, I had to break the ice with, as we said before, with Mean Gene and Gorilla and Alfred and all those guys were great. They turned
out to earn your way.
But you got to earn your way.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Now, before, because
same thing down there.
Yeah, and I want to get into all those relationships because that relationship you developed with Dusty was incredible, and and he didn't make it easy. I know. But before we get into that, because and some of these personalities that you helped shape for the WWE, tell me about though the original concept of how you guys were laying this out. Like, did you, before you brought these guys in, and figured out, okay, what we're going to do. Were you saying, because I had the opportunity to go down there and visit when all this was going on, and Sheamus was there at the time. And you had all these different things. It wasn't just, like you said, it wasn't just, it really was a school, like a university where you had, a drama class, basically, where Dusty would have, 4 or 5 of them in a room, and he would say, okay, you're a tree, whatever. And then also the whole training about being, camera awareness and voice. And it wasn't just getting into the ring on the mats and practicing your skills as a professional wrestler. So tell me about that whole idea of what we're going to do. Was it you sitting in a room and saying, okay, we're going to do this with Dr. Tom and everybody else? How did this all come together?
It really was a unique and wonderful collaboration. Okay, so first of all, Dusty, he's a freaking genius. Okay, I don't even know how to describe it. He just is. You have to be around him to understand it. I used to have to translate for people because they couldn't understand sometimes, because he was always out there. But he had so many wonderful concepts and ideas. So to your point, though, when you got a Dr. Tom Pritchard and you got, really experienced in-ring trainers, Norman Smiley, Billy Kidman, then Steamboat. Ricky Steamboat came in and he would help, and we'd have guys come in. And of course, Steve Keirn, and you had all those guys who could help with the in-ring stuff. And then who was a better character ever than Dusty Rhodes? I mean, the American, holy moly, you got the best guy ever, possibly. And then, and I did a lot of stuff at WWE. And the funny part is, when we all looked at it, we had all been, scourged from WWE at one point. As a matter of fact, Dusty used to say that we were sent to Siberia, wrestling Siberia. It just happened to be in Tampa, which was beautiful and warm, but it was wrestling Siberia. He had gotten fired from the writing team. I got fired from production. Dr. Tom and all these other guys had moved on, but somehow we all came together in this little crucible and created all of this stuff. But part of it really truly was teamwork. Like, everyone worked together, but nobody got in any other people's way. But there still was, a lot of the old school stuff, because you would hear, they told me not to do this, or they told me not to do that. And I'd be like, who's they? And it took me a while to figure some of that out, because some of the guys and girls were getting direction that I didn't think was great. But from from the individual standpoints, in the ring, the character, the TV, it kind of, I don't know, it was funny how it kind of came together. But the genius of Dusty was he would bring his kids, he called them his kids. He'd bring them in and he would have promo class. And he would let them cut promos. Sometimes he would assign characters to them. Sometimes he would, like around Christmas time, he would get scenes from movies. And he would let them do the whole scenes and do characters and things like that. And it was so much fun and creative, because you could, the talent could try different things and discover things about themselves. But we could also see things and go, oh, I didn't know she or he could do that. That's, that's interesting. But Dusty invented this promo class thing that carried on all the way through into NXT, and they're still doing it to this day. And it was basically, boom, it depended on the day. Sometimes it was, all right, cut a promo on this, and you don't even have a character yet. And you've got to figure out to sell a match or make me convinced, that you are who you are. And it was really amazing to see how lost some people were in that process. how some people were further along, but like literally how some people had no clue at all, and they just needed a little something. And then they get the something and they grab onto it, and the next thing you know, boom, they're a character. And it's remarkable, and it's so much fun. And here's the great part too. There was nobody watching us. There was no one looking over our shoulders. Nobody watched Bright House TV, right? So there's nobody from Connecticut, who's watching the one show on Bright House. So nobody ever saw anything that we did. And everybody was so busy, they didn't bother. So we came up with all kinds of crazy shows within the show. Like the Oxana show was one of them. That was like it was the first silly, goofy show that we were allowed to do. And we just made everything up. It was so funny. But yeah, and she was great. I don't know if people remember her, but do you know about that show? It was a talk show where she would have the guests on the talent.
No, I mean, I'm sure there's all these pearls that were within those shows that are. I hope they're not lost. I hope they're.
They got to be in the library somewhere. But it's like at that time, like Big E Langston, he was still developing this. This is way before New Day and all that, and I was just like, the guy. He was still working on his in-ring stuff and all that.
Yeah.
But man, he had pipes like you couldn't believe. He like had Mean Gene kind of pipes, I was just like, wow, this guy is great. So then Dusty wanted to have this talk show. You know how there's a million, the Frog, all the different talk shows we had on WW, Piper's Pit and all this.
Cyber Shop, yeah.
Yeah, so we
Snake Pit.
Yeah, so the first one we did was the Oxana show, and we made it a show, right? And so the difference was we had Big E, we had a little intro, and Big E would do, she's Oxana, like Here's Johnny, and she'd come in. And she'd have guests on like Wade Barrett or whatever, the guys, and she'd usually ask them what they think about her, because she was whatever. And we'd have a crawl running on the back. She's from Lithuania, and we'd say, this is the most popular show on G7QL. And, we just made stuff up along the way. And we could do whatever we want. For example, every show she would tease right at the beginning. So glad that you joined us. Joining us today is Wade Barrett, and later on our musical guests will be the Rolling Stones, or the next week it was Aerosmith, or it was U2, and then every week she'd get like, my producer's telling us that we're out of time. No, we can't do the Rolling Stones. Oh, I'm sorry, no Rolling Stones this week.
Sorry, Dick.
Aerosmith, And we do the same gimmick every week, but it made her comfortable, and it's helped develop her character. And the guys got an opportunity to work off of this character and have fun with it, make facial expressions. And it was little things like that we were doing that nobody knew about. And
I totally understand what you're saying. Your job is to have them break through, whatever that breakthrough is going to be. Because I know, like being in front of a camera for 40 something years now, that I always tell the kids that that are coming up, and I always tell them, at some point you're going to you let go. Yeah. When you let go, that's when it's all going to work. And I can't help but think, and that was kind of your mission. But what was that like, that first class? And I don't know if you remember exactly who was a part of it, but where did they find these guys? Where did they, when they came in? And then, as you said, you developed these things where you had the promo class and the TV, but was it kind of this like, we will see if this works? Tell me about that first class. Do you remember?
You mean like promo class and things like that?
No, the first time that these guys showed up, when you guys opened the doors and said, okay, we're open for business. What was that first group like?
Well, I didn't know much about where, where the guys and girls came from, because I didn't really know much about independent wrestlers, but they all had some level of experience before.
At that point.
When I say all of them, not 100%. Like Charlotte came because she was Charlotte Flair. She wasn't really at that point, hadn't really worked anywhere or anything like that. But they all had different levels. Like, Seth Rollins had come from Ring of Honor. And so a lot of these guys had already they had some experience. And then, some guys were from, overseas, places like you'd never heard of. And this is way before we were doing the NIL stuff, like, athletes and things like that. That hadn't happened yet. These were still people who wanted to get into the wrestling business, but for whatever reason, they hadn't been able to break through. Maybe they weren't good enough in the ring. They were too small. They were too, heavy. The girls weren't divas or, whatever it happened to be. But the first groups I think everybody was kind of feeling each other out, because I think a lot of them too, like for some of these guys, it was a step down, because they had already been on, a Ring of Honor, or even like an independent show with a big crowd. Now they're playing in front of 90 people, and that's it. We didn't even do house shows then. We started doing house shows a little bit later, but those were really small too, like in high school gyms and things like that. So initially it was a really strange mix of people who were experienced and people who were completely inexperienced. Mostly on the male side. Those guys were a combination of experience. And, we had a guy, I can't think his name now. I want to say Low Key or Koval or something like that. He had a voice like this. He was a little guy. But man, he had wrestled in Japan and all over, and he was really, really good. And he was very helpful to a lot of the other talent. And that was the other thing too, is seeing some of these other, older guys, experienced guys come in and help some of the other folks. Some guys not so much, because, the business still was, I'm more important than you kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, I think the main thing was people didn't really know if this was going to work, so they were in there not, they were trying different things, but they didn't even really know why until, somebody gets called up or somebody, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this can happen.
That's what we're working towards. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's different levels of call up too, whether, you're getting called up to be on that initial NXT show, which a lot of people have probably forgotten about. Before the NXT that existed now, there was an NXT within, I think it was within Raw or SmackDown on USA, and there were these trainers, for example, who was, Cody Rhodes was training, Husky Harris, when he got called up for that. It was a terrible show, and it wasn't a concept. It didn't work. But it was the beginning of that, you get an opportunity, but then some of those opportunities were really bad, like Husky Harris. That was Bray Wyatt, and it could have ruined him. So anyways, I'm sorry, I got off track there. But in the beginning, nobody really knew what it was going to become to that point. Like at the end of the show, we'd do the TV tapings every 3 weeks, and I'd edit the shows in my house mostly. But after each of the TV tapings, we'd go to this bar, the Brick, and we'd all commiserate with each other. The director who was learning at the time was Marty Miller, who's now the lead director. And he was switching himself and learning how to direct. But guys like Wade Barrett and Drew and Sheamus, we would all go out and just would talk and commiserate. And the next thing you know, you're building relationships with people and you're learning different things about them, and then they're starting to learn who you are and trust what you can do for them, and that helped create a situation, a camaraderie where we were able to really start pushing forward. And I remember it was funny, it had taken us a while, and I remember once going there with Marty, and man, I don't even know, maybe we're a year or two into it, and we were both marveling at how good everything was going. Like how many people have been getting called up and we're creating, stars, and the shows are actually good. At this point, we had created Bray Wyatt and all this stuff. And we both paused and realized, well, this isn't going to last. And it didn't in a good way, because it changed.
But it evolved into.
Yeah. But it evolved because we realized we had built it up to here, and then it evolved. It was going to have to, because we really were doing some special things with characters and storylines, and I don't even think we realized how good some of it was. It really was amazing. And there's so many stories I could tell about, different characters evolving there and different ideas. And I'm not really sure, where you want to. I mean, I could talk about FCW forever.
Well, I know that, when this was all being put together, like you just explained, that, you guys really didn't know what this was going to be, what it was going to look like, is it going to work? And you've got this collection of people that are from all walks of life. And they're coming in there, and we both know, we lived through it in the old West of when it was the kayfabe days. How much of a cutthroat business wrestling really is, and you're really on your own. That's basically what it is. You are an independent contractor, I like to say, and you're there one day, you could be gone the next. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear, though. It sounds to me that when you did have this collection of people, that they weren't, and you see, a lot of these reality type shows where it's, they're undercutting people, they're backstabbing. It sounded like this group of people all wanted to help each other. Is that true?
They absolutely did, and they were all rooting for each other. Sheamus and Drew were really good friends, and Wade, they rooted for each other, and they absolutely were, and they were trying different things. Xavier Woods was a tag team with Tyler Breeze before they all went in different directions, and everybody was rooting for each other. And I'll give you a story about that. And this is an interesting story. So it's forget what year it would be, but it was the first time we had WrestleMania in MetLife Stadium in New York City. So I'm not sure what year, 2008, 9, whatever it was. And at the time, Triple H was doing this giant entrance. He was the King of Kings, or it was when he had the throne and all of that kind of stuff. So they needed extras, to be part of the thing, the girls around the throne and the whole bit. So obviously, it was the easiest thing to do was get girls from FCW, because nobody knew who they were. They work in the business, so you don't have to worry about them, marking out or doing anything on stage. So they called up Charlotte, Sasha, and I think it was Alexa Bliss, Lexi. I think it was the three of them, if I remember correctly. And so they got to go to MetLife Stadium for WrestleMania, okay? And so we're in promo class one day, and to show you the camaraderie. So Bailey, at this point, she was kind of new, and she was very close with all of them. Her and Sasha were really close, and she and Charlotte and them, they all really rooted for each other, because it was hard, especially for the women, man. It's hard to break through in this business as a woman. So we're in promo class, and this is the first time I remember being a heel. Like, I didn't intend to be, but I was kind of bad. So Bailey's in promo class, and she cuts this promo. I'm so happy for my friends. They're up at, MetLife Stadium. They're in front of WrestleMania. I'm so happy for them. It's the greatest thing. Blah 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 blah. And she cuts the promo, and they ask her, "But what'd you think?" Blah blah blah. Oh, it was good. Yeah, Bailey, that's good. And they came to me and they said, "Chris, what do you think?" And I said, "I think she's full of shit." And everybody stopped, and I went, and she had, and I didn't really know Bailey at this point. She was kind of new, and I hadn't really worked with her very much. And I said, "I think you're full of shit." I said, "So you're happy that your friends are in a stadium that's going to be filled with 65,000 people. You're in this warehouse with 10 people right now cutting a promo. There's no freaking air conditioning here, and you're happy for them? I'd be freaking pissed if I were you. What's wrong with you? She starts bawling. And now I feel like a freaking heel. I mean, I really do. But I was trying to get something out of her.
I get what you're trying to do.
And I couldn't because she just started bawling. And I felt so bad. So Dusty stepped in because Dusty was great working with the women, by the way. He really was. He just really was. He took care of them really well. He was really good. So he stepped in and Bailey, he called her Bailey Whaley. He, calmed everything down. Said, Bailey, why don't you stop and take a breath? And we have a second promo class. This was the beginner's class. Then there was the intermediate class coming next. So he wanted me to stay. So we stay, and it's Bailey's turn to do, a promo. And she starts to cut a promo, and she gets like one line, blah! She sees me and just starts crying. And I'm like, oh my God, I ruined this poor girl's career. And so afterwards, we were done. I pulled her aside and said, Bailey, come here. And she's like, yeah, and I'm like, look, I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just trying to find something in you. And I said, I'm not trying to be mean. I just want you to be honest. I'm trying to find something that's in you because there's nothing, I'm not feeling it. And she starts to get emotional, and she says, well, this is something I wanted to do my whole life. And when I was a little girl, I remember getting I couldn't afford tickets to WrestleMania when it was in San Jose, and I was on a Ferris wheel, and I could see the arena, and I wanted to be in there, but I couldn't. My parents couldn't afford the ticket, and I just wish I could. And here I am, and I'm so close, and I can't. I'm not there. And I was just like, so you're a fan. You're a huge fan. And she's like, yeah, I've always been a fan. And I said, there you go. And I said to her, do you ever hear of Chris Farley? And she goes, no. And I'm like, well, he's a comedian on Saturday Night Live. He did a skit where he was a fan, and he interviewed Paul McCartney. So this was like right in the beginning of cell phones, or the smartphones. So I called it up, and I showed her interviewing, Chris Farley interviewing, Paul McCartney. And it was like so innocent, but the point of it was innocence, but the audience was in on the joke. So when, Chris Farley asked, do you remember when you were in the Beatles? It's like, it's the silliest question. But the audience is like, oh, God, and Paul's as calm and nice as can be. Well, yes, I do, like that kind of thing. And I said, watch this, see if there's something in there that you can do. Well, the next week in promo class, she had the whole character. The Bailey thing was she had the character developed. She was a fan. Who was, and back then we had the Mean Girls, which was like Summer Rae and that, and she wanted to be in the group with the Mean Girls like in high school, but she was like a fan. She was a fan of them, but she was a fan. And then she evolved that into the hugging thing later when we got into NXT. But again, it was like you're working with, you have no idea what's in there sometimes, you just don't. But she did it all herself. It was just, and it was already in there. It's just she didn't know that was something that she could do. She could be that character. And the thing about it is, once she developed that character, she was relaxed because now she wasn't stressed because she could evolve that character. And what's interesting about it is, now that I think, I never thought about this before. Another person, young lady who was really struggling in the beginning was Sasha. She just didn't, she was great in the ring. She was great, really great, but she had no personality. And then after Bailey, Sasha worked on her boss character, her uncle, I think it was her uncle or cousin was Snoop, who we ended up, doing a lot of stuff with later on. And she developed this boss character out of that. And and she was fabulous right from the beginning. And the interesting thing with Sasha was she needed to be that character. When she wasn't the boss, she wasn't really good at switching into different things, trying different. She needed to be the boss. That was her thing. And once she developed that, she was really good. And so I know I got off on I haven't even talked about Dusty or anything.
But on that vein, we mentioned all these great names that you mentioned Bray, Drew McIntyre, and Roman Reigns. Of course, we know what he's Roman become. Wow. Yeah. But and people only know them from those characters that they had developed, knew those characters, knew how to sell them. You saw them before they, in many ways, didn't even know what direction they were going in, and a bunch of and you could probably tell us all the crazy characters that they maybe went down a road and then went, wait a minute.
Some of them are pretty funny. Remember Rusev?
Yes.
Okay, Rusev. By the way, he's a really funny guy. I mean, people probably don't realize,
yeah. So
he's a really funny guy. One of the characters he had come up with, he would wear this Letterman's jacket, and he called himself Bobby, and he drove a Mustang, and he always had $40. I don't know where that came from. He goes, I don't know, but every day hi, I'm Bobby, and he would do this like. It would be like, when Dave Chappelle does an impersonation of a white guy, with the voice, and he would do this thing, and I'm telling you, there was no way it was going to be a character, because it was a character in a sitcom, but it wasn't going to be but it was so funny, and it was so creative and so whatever, but it just, wasn't going to work, but it was fun to see. Like, here he evolves into, Rusev, and he's got Lana with him and all that. And it's like, you can't believe that was the same guy, that it was Bobby with $40 and a Mustang. So, yeah, there were all these different characters, that were tried out and were just, and luckily for them, nobody ever saw them. Because those literally weren't even on FCW. Those were just in promo class. We would do some of these things and you wouldn't see them. And then, other guys, like there was a guy, Leo Kruger, we had who turned into Adam Rose. And that was a spectacular transition as well. That was fun. But it's interesting to see, when these guys go from something completely bizarre into something else. And
it's, you see, as you look at these guys now, and someone I know that you really got close to and really came into his own was Bray Wyatt. And when did you see the range that this guy had, besides what he could do in the ring? Of course, that's a given, but the range of what he could do as a character. I'll tell you when. Is like, it's interesting because I didn't really see, again, he was great in the ring because his dad was IRS, and so he really had some pedigree and he knew what to do and all that. And, he was a little heavy and all that. And that's where they came up with the stupid Husky Harris idea. They changed his name to Husky Harris, and the guy who gave him the name, I said to him, "What? That name's so freaking bad." And he was like, Vince, he loves alliteration. I'm like, oh, did somebody take Fatty Fatterson already? I mean, come on, that's like stupid. So I just, it was like the poor guy, he gets called up, he's Husky Harris. I think Cody was actually his coach, and that's another story too. I got a lot of Cody stories for another time. Good stories. So I honestly didn't see much at first in who would become Bray. Here's how it happened. So one day I'm at home and Dusty calls me and he goes, "Kid, you busy?" And I'm like, "No, what's up?" And he goes, Husky has a new character he's been working on, and he's doing something with Eli Cottonwood. I want you to see it. Can you come down? And I'm like, now? And he goes, "Yeah, if you could." I'm like, all right, I'll come down. So I didn't know they were working on. So this was Dusty and Bray. I didn't know anything about this, okay?
So they've been working on this for weeks, and Bray it's all Bray, because the character, even the name, was somebody he went to high school with. It was somebody he knew, who had been in a car accident and was all messed up, and he told me this. I love this guy. I mean, I still miss him. But anyways, so I go down to FCW, and nobody's there because Dusty didn't want anybody to see it. This was kayfabe. This was not in promo class. Nobody was there. It was just, Jeff Lane was doing the lighting, and Dusty was there, and Bray was there with Eli Cottonwood, and he cuts this, and he has a red light on him, and he cuts this promo, and he's the Bray character. I mean, it was the very beginning of the Bray character. He had the shirt and the whole thing, and he cuts the promo, and I was just like, wow. And Dusty goes, "What do you think, kid?" And I was just like, wow. First of all, this isn't really a wrestling character. It's a movie character. So we've got to look at this, completely differently. We got to approach this completely differently. But I was like, I don't see a Husky Harrison there. There's something here. And we got to figure out, what it is, the story, the backstory, whatever. And so, they started to evolve it a little bit, and then Dusty wanted to shoot vignettes, and Bray had started evolving the character. And do you want me to get into this at all, the vignettes? Okay. So this is how shotgun everything was. So I said, I'll happily do it. And of course we had no money. So the catering was, we got a bucket of chicken from KFC, and my wife Elizabeth made cupcakes. That was our catering. And we had the camera, that we only had one camera, and one of the guys was doing sound. And then and so Dusty had put together a group of people that he wanted to be there and things that he wanted. And Bray had worked out the script and blah, 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 blah. And I was trying to figure out, I don't even know what we're shooting or where we're going. I have no idea. So Bray picks out this place in Brooksville in Florida. It's a swamp, and it's basically a swamp, but it's a park, and it's near where he grew up. So he was comfortable with that. I'm like, okay, we'll go. So we got all these extras, guys and girls being there and all this, and I kind of have a little bit of handle on it, but I don't really know what we're doing. So I'm driving with Dusty and Bray, and Bray's with a bunch of the other guys, and then there's a group of other cars, and we all meet at this McDonald's. Again, this is how high budget everything was and how famous everybody was. We meet at a McDonald's to get some food, and I go to Bray, and I'm like, Bray, I'm going to shoot this any way that you want. And don't worry about editing. I've done a million vignettes, whatever. I said, but do you have an idea for how you want it to feel, what the vibe was? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, yeah, man, that show on HBO, True Blood. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really familiar with it. Calls it up on the phone. We look at the open to True Blood. And I look at it, the way it's shot, it's gritty and boom, whatever. And I was like, absolutely, I can do that. No problem. So now I have an idea in my head. I know exactly. I can do a lot of edits. I can do jump cuts, all this other different stuff. So then I talked to Dusty. I'm like, what are you thinking? He goes, it's got to be ethereal and weird, and it's got to be this and that. And he goes, but there's one thing I need. I have to have it. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I need a girl in a tree. I'm like, what? He goes, I need a girl in a dress in a tree. And I'm like, okay, she's sitting in a, no, she's got to be lying in a tree, and she's just with it. I need a girl in a tree. And I'm like, okay. So we had one of our girls, Ashley, who she was a talent at the time, and I think she later was married to Tyler, but but she was a talent herself. But anyways, we get there, and we don't really know where this character is going to go, right? So in the original vignettes, I don't know that anybody's seen them except for at FCW. but they came out great and the reaction was great. But I shot them in all these different kinds of ways, where you didn't know for sure if these people who were in the woods, he's preaching, he's like a Bayou preacher and he's in the woods and he's preaching, and the people are popping in and out. And I didn't do that just as an effect. I wanted it to be like, are those people really there, or are they in his head? You know, is he crazy, or is he like a Jim Jones leader, or is he think he's a Jim? Is it in his head, or is it real? You know, so and this was before we had Rowan and Harper even involved. This is going back to, you know, like we had all kinds of different people in there. And, you know, he cuts the promo and he does the famous run, you know, like, that kind of thing. And, we did like 5 vignettes in about 3 hours. We shot everything and then we edited it, afterwards. And the music actually was a piece of stock music. And it was found by, I think it was Rob Naylor who found it. It was either Rob Naylor or Matt Martellero. And usually, you know, when other people pick out music, you're like, well, whatever. It was perfect. I loved it. It's the entrance theme that he ended up using. And we had to make a deal with the stock music company later on to get the music, to buy the music, because we were using it forever. And as a matter of fact, the band who did the music actually came to New Orleans and performed one of Bray's entrances later when he got called up. So anyways, right. I digress, but the whole point was, like, this was really one of the first it was one of the first real character vignettes. And honestly, it was, I'd say 90% Bray, 5% Dusty. I threw a little sprinkling in, you know, with the way it was shot. And then, of course, later Bray insisted that I do all the other vignettes when he got called up. But it was really from his mind, and it was such a 180 from Husky Harris. And so these vignettes aired locally, and they were really good. And when WWE decided to call them up, they were going to redo the vignettes, and then they saw our original ones and they were like, we can't do better than this. Do you have other footage? So the first ones were based on our originals, and then we shot some new ones.
You know, what's great about that, Chris, is that if it would have been a bigger production, it probably wouldn't have been the same. Like you said, we just didn't really know what we were doing. We got a camera, and he knew what he wanted to do. He's probably very relaxed around the people. So, you know, in some ways that's great. And I love you've got so many of those stories. But before we wrap up, I do want to mention a real driving force behind all of this was Dusty. You know, that's another episode too. But tell me a little bit about your relationship with Dusty and what he brought to that school.
It can't be oversaid what he brought. I mean, you know, I can't even put it into words, because I don't know how to quantify it. It wasn't just like how talented and brilliant he was. He was such a good human being, and he really truly cared about other people, and he cared about the business, and he's such a great guy to be around. And I probably got too close to him because I just love the guy, like beyond even my own family in some regards. It's just like but none of this could have happened without him. And you can't underestimate what he brought to the table on so many freaking levels, It's just, and again, like, what a great human being. And I'm embarrassed to say that we became like very good friends. We spoke every day. Even when I moved back to Connecticut, I talked to Dusty every single day. Wow. But I didn't know that much about his wrestling career. I just knew the polka dot guy from around when you were around, and then later on. But I didn't know a lot of the back history until I started working with him and driving through Florida and seeing people freak out whenever they saw Dusty. And then even after he passed, when I felt stupid, but we would go on road trips and he would tell me all these stories. And that's another whole story. We could do a whole Dusty thing, believe me.
Oh, we will.
And it'll be, I mean, the stories he had are just, God, we used to drive from when NXT started, when we made the transition, we used to drive together. It was just me and him from Tampa to Orlando and back to do those TV tapings. And man,
like old school, like the guys getting in the cars and traveling between cities and hearing those stories must have been tremendous.
It was not just the wrestling stories. It was stories about his family and his, the grandbaby tours and oh my God. I'll get into those another time, but just like Dusty, I don't know that any of NXT exists without him. And when you really think about it, it's hard to imagine, but you listed all of that talent. They were all there at the same time. They were all there when Dusty was there. Mm-hmm. And there's still, a lot of these guys are still top performers. And it's like, I know that there's other talent coming up, but, even when we made the transition, you add on the Becky Lynch's and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, and you go on and on and on and on on that group, and you're just like, it's still Dusty, NXT and FCW. So,
well, and in many ways, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, but nobody did more with less ever, I think, in this business, because he wasn't a physical specimen. I think he's been described. I think William Regal described him as a melting sundae, with his body, well, and also, I mean, he had a lisp, and yet you look at the guy who was a tremendous ring performer, knew how to handle
work a crowd, holy moly,
and then his promos are legendary. I don't know, they talk about Mount Rushmore for promos.
Hard Times promo. Better. I mean, the Hard Times promo is probably the greatest promo I ever cut. But here's I'm glad you brought that up, because here's another thing. This became a saying at FCW and NXT, and people bitch about storyline or a character or whatever, and they say something about Dusty, whatever. One of the expressions that we used to have is Dusty got the polka dots over. Okay. Yeah. And the reason why we would say that is it was out of deference, because a lot of people felt like Vince put Dusty in the polka dots to stick it to him. He thought, I'm going to show that, because he was a big hit down. I'm going to show this guy. And whether he did or not, I don't know, because he did have good entrance. And Dusty loved his entrance music, American Dream entrance music. But I don't know that Dusty knew for sure if it was a rib or not, because we talked about it sometimes. But he got the polka dots over. Whether or not it was a rib, he made it work.
Yeah. That
is the genius of him. He could take anything and make it work. There's not that many people in the world, who could do something like that. We've all seen big stars that we know who have been other characters and they didn't work. And that's why they changed in other characters. This guy was the American Dream. He was as big as it gets, which I didn't even know at the time until I went back and watched all the stuff with Ric Flair and all that. I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. And then he got the polka dot thing over. It was like, excuse me. So that became an expression, like he got the polka dots over, and it was an expression of respect. It was like, don't bitch to this guy.
You can do that, yeah.
Yeah, like, this is a guy who can make anything work. So if he's giving you advice, you should be extremely thankful that this guy, of all the people in the world, he's the one taking time out of his day to help you. I mean, holy moly. I think a lot of the guys and girls, now that they're, later in their career, I assure you they look back and go, wow, I was lucky.
Thank God for Dusty.
I was really
life.
lucky because like if when you're around Dusty, you just think he's a crazy old man. Oh, yeah, he's crazy like Albert Einstein. He is like even in production meetings. Like I said, nobody could understand what he was talking about, but I did. And I said, what he means is this guy is going to wrestle. Oh, and there you go. Okay.
I need a can and a treat.
He just said, "Oh my God!" I tell you,
Yeah.
Andy Warhol stories, and I got so many stories he told me, man.
We need to do a Dusty episode, but this was really fascinating, and we didn't really, I think, even scratch the surface.
No.
We'd love to hear more about how Roman Reigns and the Usos and all that happened. All of New Day we mentioned, Drew McIntyre. We're going to do that, but Chris. Really, it's amazing, folks, to think about. It started in a warehouse that wasn't air conditioned. Nobody really knew what this was going to become, and look what it became. The effects still being felt today of the influence of all those people. And it wasn't just people in the ring. It was people outside of the ring were trained there to become who they are in the WWE. So, Chris, thanks for sharing all this today. We've got more to share about and talk about with the FCW, but we're gonna wrap it up there, folks. Thanks for joining us once again for Backstories. He's Chris Chambers. I'm Sean Mooney. We'll see you next time.